Shanghai is known as one of the biggest cities in the world, with more than 20 million people living there. It is one of the busiest port cities in the world, with a throughput of over 2,000 container ships every month. It's also known as a very modern and developed city, different from a lot of other places in China. However, it is considered different from other major Western cities as well, being both Chinese and modern. To Chinese people, Shanghai means a big city that's a little Western, a land of opportunity, a city of high living standards. But to Westerners, it still remains a city covered by the veil of Eastern mystery or by communism. This shows how perfectly Shanghai is a city combining Western modernity as well as Chinese modernity and traditions. As someone who lived in Shanghai my entire life, I want to explore how Shanghai became the city of multiculture and what role the West have played in its modernization process. The Shanghai town was first officially established back in 1267 and later became a county in 1292. It has long been used as a port for trade within China and activities with close-by countries such as Japan and Korea. Its great geographic location made it a small booming city in the pre-concession period. The port of Shanghai became known as an important port other than Canton, which was Guangzhou, in southern China in late Ming Dynasty and early Qing Dynasty. Other than people from all over the country, merchants from Japan, Korea, Southeastern Asia, and the Middle East also engaged in trade in Shanghai at that time. At that time, it already showed signs of becoming an international city. During the start of the 19th century, trade between Qing Dynasty of China and European countries, mostly Britain, had increased greatly. The imbalance of trade between China and Britain also increased since Britain's crave for Chinese luxury goods such as tea, silk, and porcelain far outweighs Chinese needs for British goods such as wool. Silver flowed into China far more than into Britain. Looking to remedy this imbalance, the British grew opium in the Indian colony and tried to secretly use opium to substitute silver to pay for Chinese goods. As a result, opium became really popular and were abused by many Chinese people. The addictive nature of opium made Chinese people sick and addicted, and the extent to which it was widespread among the Chinese people alarmed the Daoguang Emperor. He ordered Viceroy Lin Zexu to stop the spread of opium. Lin wrote a letter to Queen Victoria in an appeal to her moral responsibility to stop the opium trade, but received no response. Forced to act, he confiscated all opium in storage in Canton and the ships around and burned them in Humen. This action obviously irritated the British government, and they responded with a military force that defeated the Qing army easily. Qing government had to sign the Treaty of Nanking, which includes a series of British demands. These demands were to open 5 treaty ports, which includes Shanghai, to pay indemnity, to grant extraterritoriality, which includes the later Shanghai concession area, and finally, to cede Hong Kong Island. The first concession in China is the Shanghai British Concession established in 1845. Britain, France, and the US dominated the concessions in Shanghai. British concessions and the US concessions later combined into what was called the Shanghai International Settlement. Buildings that were extremely exotic to Chinese locals are commonplace in these concessions. The foreigners basically transformed the concession areas in Shanghai into their home country. For example, the British concession area had the neoclassicism style, while the US concession had the Art Deco style, which was prevalent in New York City. These marked the most obvious modernization process of Shanghai by Western occupants, which is the construction of more technologically advanced architectures. Those parts of Shanghai are a completely different world to the local residents. Most Shanghai people haven't seen wonders such as cafes or cinemas, not to mention the tall hotels that were mostly for foreigners. Cars, electric lights and fans, radios, cigars, perfumes, etc., are all things that are newly introduced to Shanghai at such a large scale. Some Chinese people, especially the communists, viewed these things as intrusive signs of capitalism, and thus viewed Shanghai as a demonic city that has been poisoned by these foreigners. However, local Shanghainese people feel differently. That, except for the luxurious hotels that no Chinese could afford, and other white exclusive clubs, cinemas, coffee shops, and department stores were all open to Chinese people. Cinemas brought foreign culture creations into Shanghai, including those Hollywood movies. Cafes became a popular spot for writers and artists alike. And department stores are the hub of both consumerism and entertainment. Couples go shopping for the latest fashion or dine at romantic Western restaurants, while families can also go to places in the department store to play with their children. In other words, the Shanghai concession greatly changed the way of living of Shanghai people and turned it into something resembling a Western or the more modern lifestyle. The Chinese word for modern, 摩登, means something novel or fashionable, according to the Chinese authoritative dictionary, 辞海. This perfectly aligns with what Shanghai was at the time. To local Chinese people, the Western lifestyle is something both novel and fashionable. Nowadays, modern has a different word, 现代化, which means exactly what modern means in English. But this still showed how Chinese people viewed Shanghai concessions as a place of modernity, and this modernity was based on a mixture of multiple Western lifestyles. Sometimes deep-bottomed ships cannot enter the Suzhou Creek. To better transport the shipments from the port to the west of Huangpu River, the British built the Wusong Railway in Shanghai in 1876, which connects the Jiabei district with Baoshan district. Since this railroad was constructed illegally, it was later possessed by the Qing government and disassembled. Nevertheless, this marked a significant progress in Chinese modernization history, since it was the first railway line in China. Also, the telegraph stations along this railway were China's first. These were allowed to stay. After the railway's removal, the Qing government official Sheng Xuanhuai constructed another railway line along the exact same path, which was called the Songhu Railway. This railway was later extended by British engineers under the consent of Guangxu Emperor into the Shanghai-Nanjing Railway. Now, the route of Songhu Railway became part of the Shanghai's Metro's Line 3. The remains of the railway after the heavy damage it received during Japanese invasion is now the site of Shanghai Railway Museum, and a memorial was placed. After the several defeat and concessions to foreign powers, the Chinese government looked to strengthen itself with modern technologies. One major part of this movement was the establishment of Qiangnan Arsenal in Shanghai. Qiangnan Arsenal, or the Jiangnan Machine Works, was established as a factory that can help Qing defend itself. Its purpose was to produce armory, naval vessels, and other industrial materials. This arsenal was originally a shipyard of an American company in the concession area. Later, Qing government bought this land and combined this shipyard with Suzhou and Anqing arsenals to form the Qiangnan Arsenal. The arsenal was very important to Qing government and had an annual budget of more than 400,000 silver taels. Later in Tongzhi era, Qiangnan Arsenal became the largest weapons factory in East Asia, and achieved the milestone of building the first domesticated steamboat in steel. It is obvious that no matter how the locals viewed them, the foreign concessions had an important positive influence on the modernization of Shanghai as one of the biggest cities in the world. During the peak of Shanghai's concession period in 1930s, it became known as the Paris of the East, the New York of the West. It became the commercial center of East Asia, attracting banks from all over the world. Western technology broadened the views of local Shanghai Chinese people, and it transformed Shanghai from a small port town into an international city. Western culture also stimulated the modernization of Chinese ways of living and Chinese artistic creations. This process is not unlike the Japanese using baseball as a tool to gain more control of Taiwan. The foreign settlers in Shanghai also used these modern technologies to make the place more comfortable for themselves and to generate more profits by building infrastructure. Their influence greatly sped up the modernization process of Shanghai and created this multicultural metropolis not to be found anywhere else. Thank you for watching.